Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting. You don't hate Mondays, it's the system, and it was designed that way, so we need to change it for the better edition. Today is a bonus. What the fuck is International Workers' Day, and why should we care? My friends, the vast majority, about 90% of the listeners of this show, are from the United States. And as an American myself, even one from the great city of New York and all it has to offer in terms of elementary and high school education, I never had a lesson about International Workers' Day. And if I may be so bold, I'm going to assume many of you out there, my fellow geographically and historically challenged Americans, may not have had one either. It's almost as if knowing why such a day exists is dangerous. Not for you, of course, for your employer. Because again, if I may be so bold to assume, you're not independently wealthy. According to a 2022 survey conducted by CNBC, even though 44% of Americans believe they have a chance at becoming a billionaire, the numbers and reality of the situation flat out say abso-fucking-lutely not. As reported by Business Insider, Bloomberg, CBS News, and ConfrontingPoverty.org, back in 2015, there were only slightly more than 500 billionaires in America, making your odds of becoming one roughly 1 in 578,508. For context, the odds of being struck by lightning in the United States during your lifetime are about 1 in 15,000. And for more context, of the 500 billionaires, only 11 were black, and a black person with a graduate degree has a 6.7% likelihood of becoming a mere millionaire, which is less than the likelihood percent of a white person with an associate degree. Only a tiny fraction of the global population reaches billionaire status, with estimates placing it around 0.00004% out of 8 billion people. Despite all this, 6 in 10 surveyed Americans believe they could make it if they were willing to work hard. And even if you don't have the fever dream of becoming a billionaire, the world as it is now requires labor to function. Your labor. And in return, you get some kind of reward, like money, to survive. And, my fellow geographically and historically challenged Americans, that Monday through Friday, 8-hour workday, with weekends, and what scant paid time off you get, those bare bones, they aren't gifts from your employer. Workers fought for the 8-hour workday, and they did so for well over a century, during the Industrial Revolution through the 1910s. Back in yonder times, the workday could range from 10 to 16 hours, with the work week typically 6 days, and child labor was totally the norm. The movement, called the labor movement, involved a fantastic number of strikes, passionate protests, and painstakingly long back-and-forth negotiations, leading to eventual legislation. Let's get into it. On April 21st, 1856, Australian stonemasons in Victoria said fuck this and undertook a mass stoppage as part of the 8-hour workday movement. And that inspired American workers to hold their first strikes. The pressure cooker boiled over in 1884, when the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions reached deep into their fuck this bucket and voted unanimously to set May 1st, 1886, 30 years after the first major strikes, as the date by which 8-hour workdays would become standard. They gave themselves a hard deadline and had 2 years to make it a reality. As the chosen date approached, labor unions around the United States coordinated and prepared for one of the largest nationwide general strikes, believing it would be the catalyst that would make the change. So when Saturday, May 1st approached, quote, thousands of workers went on strike and attended rallies held throughout the United States. Estimates of the number of striking workers across the U.S. ranged from 300,000 to 500,000. In Chicago, the movement's center, an estimated 30 to 40,000 workers had gone on strike, and there were perhaps twice as many people out on the streets participating in various demonstrations and marches. End quote. From the wiki. My fiery business goose, one day was not enough to contain the collective power and emotions of all those involved, and the movement spilled into May 3rd, where the awesomely named August Spies, an American upholsterer and radical labor activist, stood outside the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company plant on the west side of Chicago, advising striking workers to, quote, hold together, to stand by their union, or they would not succeed, end quote, again from the wiki. When the end of workday bell sounded on May 3rd, striking workers moved to the gates of the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company to continue their protest. This time, yelling and chanting at the strike breakers who replaced them for the day. Police, feeling vastly outnumbered and overwhelmed by the situation, did what they usually do in this situation, and turned a nonviolent protest into a violent disaster. They fired into the crowd. 2 McCormick workers were killed. Some newspaper accounts said 6. The murders, though, didn't stop the striking workers. The rage felt was channeled into calling for more strikes, and locals quickly printed and distributed flyers calling for a rally the following day at Haymarket Square. If you quit your job and pick up your phone to head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post, you can give that flyer a read. It is filled with intense emotion and impassioned statements like, in all caps, revenge, exclamation point, working men, to arms, 3 exclamation points. Quote, your masters sent out their bloodhounds, the police. They killed 6 of your brothers at McCormick's this afternoon. They killed the poor wretches because they, like you, had the courage to disobey the supreme will of your bosses. They killed them because they dared ask for a shortened of the hours of toil. And it goes on for 2 more paragraphs. Let's see here. You have for years endured the most abject humiliations. What else does it say? You have for years suffered unmeasurable inequities. You have worked yourself to death. And it keeps going. When will you ask them now to lessen your burden? And then it says at the very end, to arms we call you, to arms, exclamation point. Signed, your brothers. Wow. Needless to say, when cops discovered more than 20,000 copies of these flyers were distributed, they weren't thrilled. The next day, on May 4th, a rally at Haymarket Square in Chicago began in the evening with August spies, and fellow labor activists Albert Parsons and Reverend Samuel Fielden planning to give speeches, and boy howdy did they talk. Well, it was mostly Parsons who went on and on for an hour, when finally giving the floor to Fielden, who was like, all right, well, yeah, it's raining, so I'll just say a few words, it'll take 10 minutes. Thanks to the weather and the goddamn time, the rally began to wind down at 10:30 p.m., and what little crowd remained suddenly heard the voice of Police Inspector John Bonfield. Quote, I command you, the speaker, in the name of the law to desist, and you, the crowd, to disperse. End quote. The police force began to advance on the smaller crowd, which, to no one's surprise, led to unimaginable violence. A bomb was detonated. There was an exchange of gunshots between police and demonstrators. Witnesses maintained that, quote, nearly all sources agreed that it was the police who opened fire, reloaded, and then fired again, killing at least 4 and wounding as many as 70, end quote from the wiki. By morning, 7 policemen and at least 4 workers were killed. The New York Times and the press reported that it was demonstrators who began firing at the police, who had no choice but to fire in return. Thus began a harsh anti-union clampdown, and public opinion about the labor movement began to turn. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar. Emboldened, employers took this opportunity to go back to their old ways, making workers clock in for 10 or more hours a day. Quote, there was a massive outpouring of community and business support for the police, and many thousands of dollars were donated to funds for their medical care and to assist their efforts. The entire labor and immigrant community became under suspicion. Police raids were carried out on homes and offices of suspected anarchists. Dozens of suspects, many only remotely related to what became known as the Haymarket Affair, were arrested, all while ignoring legal requirements such as search warrants. End quote. From the wiki and Jay Winnick's book, The Great Upheaval, America and the Birth of the Modern World. It's 2025, and despite all the research and technology we have, There's been no conclusive evidence on who detonated the bomb that resulted in police shooting people rather than helping people. But that didn't stop the courts at the time, in 1886, from making convictions. 8 people were charged, and even though only 2 of the 8 were at Haymarket at the time, 7 were sentenced to death, and 1 of them to a term of 15 years in prison. Illinois Governor Richard J. Oglesby commuted 2 of the death sentences to terms of life in prison, and unfortunately the other died by suicide in jail before his scheduled execution. The remaining 4 were hanged, including the awesomely named August Spies. My friends, this event, the Haymarket Affair, is generally considered the origin of International Workers' Day, held on May 1st. It happened here, but we don't acknowledge it really. I mean, sure, we have Labor Day in September, and that's basically 1 day of vacation spent purchasing shit you don't need that's on sale. It wasn't until 1916 the Adamson Act passed, establishing an 8-hour workday with additional pay for overtime for railroad workers. This was the first federal law that regulated the hours of any workers in private companies. The protections spread beyond the railroads in 1937 with the Fair Labor Standards Act, setting the maximum work week to 40 hours and establishing overtime pay. My friends, this protection has only existed for 88 years, and the fight for it took longer than that. And the fight needs to continue. So how do we do it? Well, we can start by taking a page from the history we just learned, by forming unions. After the break, I'm going to share a TED Talk featuring political economist Margaret Levy, who'll explain how unions forge equality and help protect not only workers' rights, but help create human rights. The weekend, Social Security, health insurance, it's thanks to unions. Oh, by the way, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the flock, my United Business Goose. Next week, we'll be back on Old Medical Oddities Lane with some lighter stuff. And by lighter stuff, I mean parasites and things coming out of people where they shouldn't. I can't wait. In the meantime, stay tuned for political economist Margaret Levy and how we can revive the labor movement in order to build a more equitable future. Stay tuned.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
And we're back. We are so back. And as promised, political economist Margaret Levy's TED Talk, How Labor Unions Shape Society, as recorded back in Seattle on November 2021. Let's have a listen.
It's easy to imagine a world without labor unions. We're essentially living in that world now, and we are worse off as a result. Few of you probably belong to unions, but almost all of you benefit from them. It was unions that brought us the weekend. More importantly, unions built the middle class by ensuring that workers had the incomes to support families, to buy homes and cars, and to dream that their children could do better than they could. It was union power and advocacy that helped us win Social Security and health insurance, upon which almost all of us depend. In the 1950s, 33% of private sector workers belonged to unions. Big labor stood proudly beside big business and big government. No more. Today, only 6% of private sector workers are members of unions. With their decline in numbers came a decline in political and economic power, and the result? A significant increase in inequality, a significant deterioration in the possibility of a middle-class lifestyle for this generation or the next, and a receding chance to own a home or afford retirement. We need unions to regain the power so that we can regain what we have lost, build a better future, and help forge democracies that are built on a decent social contract between citizens and government and among citizens themselves. Yes, we need unions today as much as ever. As a professor of political science and someone who has studied labor unions for a long time, I can tell you that one of the most important things that unions do is to counterbalance the power of corporations. They even the playing field. Yes, we need unions, but we need better and different unions that are more attuned to the 21st century. Let's picture the world before unions. Small children toiling all day and even into the night in noisy, polluted factories. Or immigrant women workers jumping from a burning sweatshop because the fire escapes were locked so that they could not take breaks. That was New York City in 1911. That's Bangladesh now. But unions changed that by winning protections for workers. They transformed lives. They enabled even the worst off to achieve the American dream. Consider the longshore workers, those who load and unload ships. In the morning, the boss came and yelled all along the shore, thus the name longshore. They pleaded for the scarce jobs, just as migrant day laborers do today at places like Lowe's and Home Depot. It was humiliating, degrading. But when the unions won the right to organize and won contracts, the wharf rats became lords of the dock. They became middle class. They could marry. They could support families. They could send their children to college. They had health insurance and benefits. They had dignity, respect. They were full American citizens. Unions enabled others to attain the American dream by raising wages generally and by reducing wage disparities between men and women and among the races. My research has shown me that with every transformation in the economy, the technology, the way we work, there has been an evolution in the labor movement. Craft unions, think construction work or even beer making, emerged from medieval guilds. With the rise of industry, auto, steel, new forms of organization emerged. When white-collar workers in offices, in government, in healthcare, in professions began to want voice and representation, yet another kind of union developed. In my mind, in my ears, is Dolly Parton singing 925, inspired by a real-life union of that name. When you hear that song, thank the unions for a decent working day. History shows that unions helped people get dignity, rise out of poverty, inhibit workplace dangers and harassment, and improve health and well-being of us all. These are not yesterday's problems. Workers of today still need and want unions. An MIT survey revealed that 50% of the non-union workforce would join a union if given a chance. So, Margaret, if unions are so great, why are they in such serious decline? Because the odds are stacked against them. Many of you have read about the Amazon warehouse workers who failed to win a union representation election in Alabama. They failed because of concerted employer opposition. Indeed, there are many employers and politicians who are preventing the reform of labor laws passed nearly a century ago in another era and another economy. These are laws that inhibit agriculture and domestic workers from organizing, largely Black and brown workers. They make it hard for workers in the gig economy to organize, those we call forth with our apps, rideshare, delivery service, specialized tasks. There are employers and politicians who are pushing states to pass right-to-work laws that abolish the requirement that those who are covered by union contracts have to pay union dues. This effectively kills the unions. Many workers in 27 states do not have to pay for the benefits the unions provide for them. States that include Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin, former union strongholds. And society loses big. A recent study revealed that in right-to-work law states, there is slower economic growth, higher consumer debt, lower wages, worse health outcomes, and lower civic participation than in states without such laws on the books. But it's not just employers and politicians that are holding unions back. Unions are a cause of some of their own problems. Some unions are extremely bureaucratic, stifling debate and innovation. Some union leaders are corrupt, rigging elections, paying themselves humongous salaries, even when they represent very low-income workers. And some commit felonies. Jimmy Hoffa is the notorious example of a labor leader who went to prison. But just this year, several high-ranking officials in the United Auto Workers were sentenced for embezzlement. Now, many critics, possibly some of you, blame unions for inflation. When wages go up, consumer prices go up. True enough, but so does the standard of living for workers. And we, as taxpayers, benefit from higher standards of living by workers. The pandemic gave us the term essential workers. If those in grocery, warehousing, food processing, delivery had strong unions, indeed any unions at all, there would have been no need for federal programs for those who have jobs to feed their families and prevent evictions. Now, there are many reasons for union decline, including structural ones, the decline in union jobs in manufacturing. But a major reason is public lack of awareness, even misinformation about the value of unions. Well before President Reagan fired the striking air controllers in 1981, there has been concerted and continuous opposition by employers and politicians to undermine unions. Employers no longer suppress unions by hiring private armies like U.S. Steel, Ford, and the coal companies did. Now they hire very high-priced consulting firms to do that work. Elected officials may no longer call out the police and the National Guard to cart labor organizers off to jail. Now they pass legislation that restricts union organizing and power. But workers are beginning to fight back, as the headlines reveal. They are building solidarity across racial, ethnic, religious, partisan divides. Martin Luther King exhorted us to enwrap ourselves in a single garment of destiny. I have observed several unions that I've studied build expanded and inclusive communities of fate in which large numbers of others recognize that their destinies are entwined despite differences and distances. This doesn't always happen, but it can, and it must. If you took my class or gave me another hour, I could give you numerous examples. We need, as employees and citizens, to build solidarity through communities of faith that crosses geographies and differences. But to do that, we need to reimagine labor unions for now. The labor movement must evolve as it has in the past, even producing possibly alt-unions, alternatives to unions, alternatives to traditional unions. Workers in gig professions, tech, don't necessarily want a traditional union, but they do want influence over their wages, working conditions, and even the policies of their companies. And they are reimagining old approaches and coming up with new ones in order to build worker voice and power. Some are reconfiguring worker cooperatives, employee-owned businesses in which the workers determine wages, working conditions, and distribution of profits. This is not a pipe dream. Mondragon in Spain has over 80,000 employee owners, takes in over $13 billion a year, and redistributes its profits to build worker skills and capacities among its member cooperatives. A newer approach is to use platform technologies to teach workers their rights. In our global, hyper-connected, and socially isolating world, platforms such as coworker.org or Unit recognize and address the fact that there is a mobile workforce that no longer has water coolers or lunchrooms around which to gather and strategize. These platforms provide workers with a way to share experiences, access organizing resources, and build networks at scale across geographies and employers. Coworker.org had a huge win with Alphabet, the parent company of Google, a giant among tech firms. Alphabet workers recognize that they are part of a community of faith that crosses large distances. They have been protesting Google's contracts with the Pentagon and with immigration authorities. They have normal run-of-the-mill economic union demands, but they also have the political demand that they should have a say over company policies that affect them and us. Now, whatever you thought of unions in the past, I hope that these examples have revealed to you what they can be today and for tomorrow. Unions once significantly reduced in an income inequality, the gap between the rich and the poor. They can again. These graph lines came together when unions rose. I'd like to see those lines permanently converge and inequality reduced once and for all. Billionaires are building rockets to explore outer space. This is so exciting. But equally exciting are the workers who are providing the goods and services on which those billionaires we all depend, exploring new ways to gain power and voice. If even some of these explorations succeed, workers will gain dignity, economic security, and the power to challenge employers and politicians. The result? The resuscitation of the middle class and a far more equitable society. Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening, rating, subscribing, telling your friends all the horrible things I said and all the wonderful things she said. And a powerful power to the people. Thanks to the folks over at Airwaves Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family. And please, stay interesting.